So this lesson is on the distributive property. If you remember from the order of operations, GEMDAS, G starts for grouping symbols, and if you look inside the parentheses, which is a grouping set of grouping symbols, x plus 4, we learned in the last lesson, are not like terms. We can't add them, there's nothing to do. But we have the distributive property because you're multiplying 7 by everything inside the parentheses, so we distribute the 7. So 7 times x, we know that the multiplication, we just put them together because there's nothing to simplify. And 7 times positive 4 is going to be positive 28. And we also know, again, just same as there's nothing to add inside the parentheses, you've got your final answer because 7x and 28 are not like terms. So same thing happens when you distribute a negative. So I can distribute the negative 4 to both. Negative 4 times y is negative 4y. Negative 4 times positive 3, because the plus 3 shows that the 3 term is positive, we get negative 12, and we just keep it as minus 12 to indicate the subtraction. Now, number 5, notice we have this negative sign in front of the parentheses. I need you guys to understand that that means the number in front of the parentheses is negative 1 times the y minus 9. Anytime you see a negative in front of parentheses, it's a negative 1. And you distribute. You can think of it as distributing the negative. As long as you understand, it's the same thing as multiplying by negative 1. So negative 1 times y is negative 1y, and negative 1 times negative 9 is a positive 9. But same idea, the reason why the 1 isn't written here, the 1 we don't generally write, it's just not the higher level of mastery. We understand that, oh, okay, I write it as negative y minus 9 as my final answer. And that shows a higher level of mastery in understanding the symbolism. So when you have the negative y, you understand that that means negative 1 times y. So we can go ahead and distribute just about any integer within any set of parentheses. So like here, negative 4 times negative w, and remember that negative w is the same thing as a negative 1w, but we're not going to write that. We basically just think, well, negative times a negative is 4w, and negative 4 times negative 10 is a positive 40, so we're going to write plus 40. And because they're not like terms, we can't add them. Same idea here. If there's a coefficient in front of the variable, when we distribute the negative 3, we just multiply the coefficient and the negative 3. So negative 3 times 2x is negative 6x. Negative 3 times negative 4 is a positive 12. So we end up getting negative 6x plus 12. So we can also distribute variables, not just numerical values or integers. So x times y, well, just like negative 3 times 2x, we multiply the coefficients. Anything next to each other means multiplication, so the x times y we just write as xy. And we know by the symbolism in math for algebra that this means multiplication. And x times 4 we just write as plus 4x. And there's no like terms, so we keep them as our final answer. It can be the same thing if there's a coefficient on the variable that we distribute. 6a times b we just write as 6ab. 6a times 2c, well, we just multiply the coefficients. 6 times 2 is positive 12, and then a times c we just write as the ac. Okay. Same thing if there's 3 terms. However many terms are in the parentheses, it could be 2 or more. We just distribute it, whatever's outside that we're multiplying, the entire set, we multiply everything. So x times 2y is 2xy. We just write it alphabetically. X times minus 5z, we write it as minus 5xz. And x times positive 1, we just write it as positive x. Okay. Now, fractions, anytime you multiply a fraction by a whole number, you put the whole number over 1. So when you distribute fractions, you're basically distributing numerator and denominator to every term. So in this case, for number 16, if I distribute numerator and denominator, I get 8. So 1 times 8x is 8x. Oops. For the numerator, and 4 times 1 is in the denominator. And then I go to the second term. So 1 times minus 4 is minus 4 over 4 times 1 is 4. Now you always, is your last step after you reduce, is you want, or sorry, after you distribute, you want to reduce each term. And remember that a fraction is division. So if I can divide the top number by the bottom to get a whole number, like 8 divided by 4, go ahead and do that. And I'm going to write that over here. So it becomes 2x. And then you have your minus 4 over 4. Well, 4 divided by 4 is 1. Or you can think of it as 4 over 4 is the whole number 1. Okay. So again, when you distribute fractions, make sure you put your whole numbers over 1, and you distribute both the numerator and the denominator to each term. Okay. So, and now let's put it all together. So this is two-step, where you're always going to distribute first and then combine like terms. So these are the steps that you follow. Okay. So like in number 1, we're going to distribute the 8, but only through the 2x and the minus 3, since those are the only ones in the parentheses where the 8 is being multiplied. So you get 16x minus 24, and then we have the minus 6x. Now we go ahead and transition to our lesson on combining like terms. So the 16x and the negative 6x we can combine. The negative 24 we can't. But 16x and negative 6x is positive 10x minus 24. There's our final answer. Okay. Make that a little clearer. There we go. All right. So sometimes, like in number 2, you actually have to distribute twice. So in the first set of parentheses, we distribute 9. In the second set of parentheses, we distribute the whole negative 2. You've got to take the sign in front of the number that's being distributed. So we get 18k minus 36 minus 14k and plus 24, because a negative 2 times negative 12 is 24. You have to keep the sign with the term that you're distributing in the parentheses. Now we can go ahead and combine like terms, our 18k, our negative 14k, and we get, since there's more positives, once we subtract, we get 4k, and negative 36 plus 24, there's more negatives, so when we subtract, it's negative 12. And there's our final answer. Now look at number 3. Notice that we have a minus sign that's separating the 10 from the parentheses. So we do not distribute the 10. Again, if you remember, back up to example 5, anytime there's a negative in front of the parentheses, that means negative 1 times the parentheses. So it's the same thing here. There's actually a negative 1 in front of the parentheses. So we distribute that negative 1 inside every term of the parentheses. So we get 10 times minus 1y, and then a negative times a negative, positive 6. It's just positive 6, negative 1 times negative 6. And then we copy the negative y, and I'm just going to write it as negative 1y to remind you. So we can combine like terms, and we end up getting negative 2y, because they're both negative, we add, and then positive 10 and positive 6 add to positive 16. Okay? We're going to talk about 5 and 6 in class together, but on number 4, since we have 2 sets of parentheses, we're going to distribute twice. The first set of parentheses, we distribute the 8, so the 6, nothing happens to it because the plus is separating it. So we can just copy the 6 plus, and then 8 times 4 is our 32w, and 8 times minus 7 is negative 56. Now notice the second set of parentheses, well again, if we have the negative in front, just like number 5, anytime there's a negative sign in front, we're actually distributing a negative 1. So there's actually a -1 that we're distributing, which anytime you multiply by -1, it essentially just becomes the opposite sign. So -1 times 2w becomes -2w, and -1 times +1 becomes -1. Now for step 2, we combine like terms. So we combine the positive 32w and the negative 2w. So there's more positives. We subtract because they're opposite signs, so you have 30w. Now we can add the positive 6, the negative 56, and the -1. I just like to do 2 at a time. So positive 6 and negative 56, we subtract, there's more negatives, so it's -50, and then we minus 1, so it's -51. So anytime you're combining integers that are the same sign, you just add them. Okay, we will talk more about these in class, but if you, okay. So now go ahead and do all the problems that I did not do in this lesson. I'm going to put the answers out so that you can check and make sure that you understand them and bring up any questions in class. If you're really stuck on the fractions ones, we'll go through those in class as well.